well, thanks very much for coming. My name's Chris Bennett. I'm in the philosophy department at the University of Sheffield. The project that I'm working on at the moment is called Democracy and Criminal Justice. So it's an attempt to work out what is the best form, if any, of public input into decision making in the criminal justice system. So the question that I put for this session is, should there be greater public participation in criminal justice? And the answer that I want to give to that question is yes, in some sense, but it depends what form the input takes. That's going to be the really interesting question. So that's what the project is investigating. How can you have public input into the criminal justice system where that works in a constructive kind of way? So the way in which I want to explain the point of the project at the moment is to say a bit about why some people might answer no to that question. Okay? Should there be greater public participation in the criminal justice system? Some people will say no. Well, why is that? Well, one reason is that, for instance, from about the mid-90s to about 2010, the prison population in the UK doubled. Why did that happen? That's an extraordinary thing to have happened, from about 40,000 people in prisons to about 80,000 people in prisons. Why did that happen? Well, part of the explanation that seems to be accepted by people is not necessarily that there was more crime. In fact, largely crime has been falling at that period. Okay? Rather, what happened was that the two major political parties got into a toxic debate about being tough on crime. And because of that, more people ended up getting sent to prison for longer. And that's put incredible strain on the prison system with all sorts of problems, including rises in prison suicides to levels that have never been seen before, and so on. So look, that's a problem, okay? That's a problem. Hasn't that problem been caused by the public becoming more assertive about wanting a say in criminal justice, wanting to see prisons being used, being tougher on criminals and so on? Doesn't that show that that's what the public wants? So there's a proposal, okay, which I want to argue against, a proposal that's been put forward by some people to delegate criminal justice decision-making to a committee of experts that would be insulated from political debates and public opinion in the way that, for instance, the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee is so insulated. Okay? So when New Labour came into power in 1997, first thing that Gordon Brown did was to devolve certain aspects of monetary policy to a committee, largely populated by economists, experts, and so on, that would be then beyond a certain kind of political control. Could that not be done to criminal justice policy? So I want to argue that that's the wrong way to go in some respects. Okay, I agree that that's some kind of solution, but I don't think that's the right kind of solution. So an initial worry that you might have about that is this suggestion that we insulate criminal justice policy from public opinion is that it's undemocratic in some way. Is it undemocratic to do that? So that's a good question, because it depends really what democracy is and what's important about democracy, or which form of democracy gives us what's important about democracy. And those are all philosophical questions, okay? So that's where I come in. That's the bit that, that gives us something to think about. So there's an easy way to say that no, devolving policy to a committee is not anti-democratic. Why is it not anti-democratic? Okay, I mean there is an answer along these lines. Basically, this line says, what is characteristic of democracy is that political authority basically rests with the people. Okay, ultimately they are the source, the ultimate source of political authority. But of course, the people can decide to devolve or to delegate certain functions, to authorize certain bodies, to transmit their authority to other bodies to make decisions for them. Okay, that's perfectly fine. And if you think that ultimately the authority is coming from the people, then delegating it is fine. So I think there's something unsatisfactory about that answer. That's not democratic enough. So I think that what's important about democracy is not just that ultimately authority rests with the people, they can devolve it as they like. There are some other things that are important about public participation in political decision making. And so what I want to do now, just very quickly, is to give you 3 aspects in which that might be important. So the first argument is what I call the correction argument, okay? And the correction argument says that one good reason for having the public making decisions, having the public involved in decision making, official decision making, is that it brings a certain kind of expertise into criminal justice, or whatever the domain is, okay? And it stops decision making just being made according to certain institutional biases that officials can end up having, okay? So I call that the correction argument. Another argument that could be put is what's been called the civic schoolhouse argument. Okay, this is a slightly Americanized name, but it's, put forward in the American debate. And the thought is that citizens getting involved in decision making can be advantageous in 2 different ways. One is that it reduces the gap between the decisions that officials are making and what citizens themselves understand. Okay? Citizens themselves are getting involved in things, and they have to realize how tough these decisions are to make, and they can't just make gut judgments about, that's a ridiculous decision. They're actually, they're putting themselves more in the perspective of those decision makers. The second thing that's good about the civic schoolhouse thesis is that it allows people to develop certain skills that are useful skills about citizenship. Okay? Actually taking responsibility for things, learning what the consequences of certain political actions are, and so on. So that's an important thing that citizens, as democratic citizens, taking responsibility for running their own society need to have. So that's the civic schoolhouse thesis. So we've had 2 arguments. We've had the correction argument, okay, that there can be institutional biases. Getting lay people in brings new expertise into the system. We've got the civic schoolhouse argument, which says that it's good for citizens, it educates citizens, and that's a good thing to get them involved in decision making. But the third kind of argument is one that's been less explored in the literature, and I think has some kind of intuitive weight. And I'm not yet sure how to articulate this fully, but this is one of the things that I'm kind of working on at the moment. So I have a thought that, in a way, the criminal justice system is the dirty business of any society. Okay? It's the really tough stuff where you've got to decide, how we are going, what are we going to do? We've got a society that's structured around certain values. Some people violate those values. What are we going to do with them? Often these people are from poor, vulnerable backgrounds and so on. They've got various other kind of social problems. How really are we going to deal with those things? Now, it just seems like a bit of a derogation of citizenship to say, well, look, I'm really going to delegate that to a bunch of technocrats who are then going to make the decisions for us. I'm not going to take responsibility for making those decisions myself. So I think that it might be a certain responsibility of citizenship to look those problems in the eye and deal with them ourselves, to take on the dirty business of citizenship ourselves. So I think that that's another important reason for getting the public involved in decision making in the criminal justice system. The big question, if you like these arguments, is what form should that take? What can actually be done? One simple proposal would just be to use juries in many more aspects of criminal justice decision making. Juries are democratic because it's just random selection. They also allow for a certain kind of common deliberation. They can allow people to bring expertise to bear. There are problems with juries, okay? There are all sorts of problems with juries. And whether we can find an institutional form that is based on the jury, or maybe is something different, to bring the public into the criminal justice system in constructive ways, well, that's the thing that this project is trying to sort out. But I hope to have given you some reasons for thinking that insulating criminal justice policy in the way that monetary policy has been insulated is not an ultimately satisfactory way to go. Okay, thank you very much.